you're gonna look great. But if you wanna stay in shape, well, you better hit the GymWits.
That's right, man. Tell 'em.
Welcome to the GymWits podcast. I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, aka Chef Sonic.
And I'm Tony Marinucci, aka Tips with Tony, your registered dietitian.
And we are the GymWits.
So we have another awesome in-studio interview. Welcome, Melanie Boehmer. How's everything, Melanie?
Everything is great.
So Melanie is a registered dietitian, just like Tony, but she's also an internationally certified sports nutritionist.
That is correct.
What is that?
It is an international certification in sports nutrition via the International Society of Sports Nutrition, which is an organization that was started by a group of sports scientists. And basically what you have to do for this certification is study a lot and take a test, and thereon continue to do continuing education and attend a bunch of different conferences in order to keep up with the information and everything going on in the sports science world.
Nice. Sounds like fun.
So you might be wondering, why do we have two dietitians on the show? And well, one is that Melanie and Tony are good friends, and we want to get a little bit into how you guys know each other. And the other part is just fitness, nutrition. There are tons of different specializations, and for us, it's really important that we get the experts on those specific things, and we get lots of questions on nutrition. We get lots of questions on sports nutrition, and I think it's awesome to have somebody who that's really their area of expertise. It helps us, and it's part of our service to our listeners. So before we get really into sports nutrition, I guess. Melanie, if you can tell us a little bit about your own background in fitness, what got you into it, what got you into nutrition, and how you and Tony know each other.
Sure. Well, I've been an athlete my whole life. I played soccer growing up. I played for a year in college, which is how I actually started nutrition. I went into college as a dietetics major, and it was really during my freshman year that I realized just how important nutrition was, especially for performance. And what I ended up doing was getting more involved on the nutrition side. So I stepped away as an athlete myself and then started working with all the athletes on their nutrition. I worked with the athletic trainers and a couple of the heads at my department at Oneonta.
Cool. And so how do you and Tony know each other?
Through Oneonta.
Yeah.
We did our undergraduate degrees together, and after that went on to do our master's and dietetic internship together. So
what sports did you play?
soccer.
Okay.
Yeah. My whole life.
Yeah. So we have our own questions and things that come up often, but we did have an Ask the Dietitian question, and initially Tony was going to answer, but then she thought, you were going to be on the podcast, so it might be best for you to answer the question.
Yep.
So Tony, do you have the question on you?
I can read it, sure. Yeah, let me pull it up. The reason why I was bringing Melanie on to answer it is because I could have done the research and looked it up and found credible resources. I could have honestly just asked Mel as my best friend and a registered dietitian who's credible and then reported it back. But I am a huge fan of Melanie, and she is seriously an amazing human being. And I think that if you're looking for specific sports performance guidelines, she's definitely your person for that. So I wanted her to be able to answer it, and that way she knows the more up-to-date research. Like, I just could, get things where other RDs get things. Not that that's a bad thing, just she is always researching this stuff. With that being said, here's the question, and it's a little bit lengthy, so bear with me. So this is from Lindsay, and I'm not sure where she's from because I've cut that part off. I apologize. But question comes from Lindsay. Hi, I have started listening to your podcast via Spotify. I would love it if you guys could do a whole podcast about supplements. Branched chain amino acids, DHEA, CLA, protein, pre-workouts, and creatine. Also discuss vitamins that we should take, calcium, magnesium, fish oil, and multi. I'm constantly wondering if I'm taking too much or the wrong combination of supplements. Am I overloading my kidneys? Is it worth it? What should be and what shouldn't be taken together? What could cause possible overdose and side effects? I think this would be a great topic to discuss because many websites and podcasts talk about them separately and never about what's too much and what could be harmful if combined. Example, should I take a pre-workout and then the branched BCAAs during a workout? If not, which Which one's more important? As a female, is creatine important or diminishing my desired results? Thanks for taking the time to read, and I hope you consider this topic. Lindsay. All right.
Woo!
Melanie, I don't know where you want to begin with that. I don't know if we want to maybe ask the questions that are correlated to that, or if you want to just kind of jump and start and see where we go from there.
Sure. Well, I think that we should probably start with creatine. Creatine monohydrate is the most studied supplement out there, and I think it would be beneficial for all of us to take. There's actually 2 different loading phases. There's a rapid load that would be more beneficial for athletes because of the performance benefits of creatine, more specifically like high intensity exercise, and cognitively as well. So for a lot of sports that have high contact, so football, boxing, and high intensity like basketball, soccer. And from a long-term loading phase and the long-term effects of creatine, we're actually finding in a clinical setting it's good in terms of prevention of Alzheimer's and dementia.
Yeah. Wow. So a couple questions based on that. So I think we've heard, I've heard that creatine's and read that it's an effective supplement. One thing that I've read is that it loses its effectiveness over time. So I guess, is that a myth? And also, then you've always heard like it damages the kidneys and stuff like that. So I guess, are there any negative side effects? And again, like what taking it long term do the effects kind of diminish when you're using creatine?
Good question. I would say that they don't diminish. I think with a rapid load, you'll see a more immediate result. But I would say from a performance standpoint, no, it's about keeping your stores high. So again, from an immediate standpoint, like a vegetarian, if they supplement with creatine is found in animal-based proteins. That's how we would get it from a food source. So for people who aren't naturally taking in red meat or seafood, if they're loading with creatine, they're going to see an immediate result. From a long-term standpoint, you actually lower the dose. So the rapid load would be a 5-gram load 4 times a day for 5 to 7 days. After that, you drop it down to 5 grams. But no, I would definitely continue to do that. And I don't think it's something that you need to cycle, which would mean you come off and come back on.
So then it doesn't like destroy your kidneys or do any damage to you?
No, it doesn't. Not at all. The only side effect that some people have is a little bit of water retention. Okay. But if your muscles are swelling, you're going to hold more water. So that's what that's from. No.
No, I think that's where women don't like taking it because they don't. Their thought is like, no, I don't want to get buff, but that's just a side effect of it. It doesn't mean that it's actually making you puffy. It's just something that can happen.
Exactly, and it's definitely not in everyone. It's on an individual case. So,
but why? So why a supplement and not the whole food form?
You could take the whole food form, but in terms of how your body absorbs it, some of that is excreted in the urine, which is why this idea of stress on the kidneys, I think, comes into play. Mm-hmm. But it's only 1% to 2% of it.
Okay.
So
if I eat lots of red meat, which I do, as you know by listening to our vegan episode, do I need to additionally supplement, or is the red meat enough to maximize my creatine intake?
I think that getting it from a whole food source would be great if you're doing that first. But depending on your exercise intensity level is going to depend on if I would supplement. So what we have to remember with supplements in general is that they are a supplement. So they're not meant to, be interchanged with food. But, if you're training 2-3 times a day, then you're really putting stress on your skeletal muscle.
Right. Where for sports performance, I can understand that.
Exactly.
I guess, what about for the listeners that maybe work out 3 to 5 days a week for 30 to 45 minutes to maybe an hour?
I don't think that it's necessary, so you don't have to take it. Mm-hmm. But I do think if that's the case, it might be worth taking it as that longer load that I was talking about. So that 3 grams, daily, just for the cognitive benefits. Again, especially if you have a history of Alzheimer's and dementia in your family, this new research that's coming out is really solid. And in the clinical populations, it's actually pretty cool to see that we're using that as a supplement.
Thank you for sharing. That's really important.
What about some of those other supplements that were in the question, DHEA and all that stuff?
DHEA and CLA, both of which the research is kind of in between. So DHEA actually in men decreases after age 40. So that's the only time, if you're visiting with your doctor and your lab work shows that it's decreasing, that I might supplement with it. From a sports performance standpoint, I don't think it's a necessary supplement. And again, the research is not there. CLA, same thing. CLA you get from quality proteins, again, animal. However, what we see in the research that it actually depends on the type of product you're getting it from. So that I would say you're better off having pastured Berkshire pork and grass-fed beef and things like that, and getting your CLA from that rather than taking a supplement.
Now, what about branched chain amino acids? So that's something that we hear a lot of as far as supplementation has become very big, over the last 10 years. How important is that to supplement? Let's say if you are eating a normal balanced diet, how important is that as an athlete?
If you're eating a normal balanced diet and you're an everyday person, going to the gym maybe 4 days a week, I don't think that it's necessary. The branched chain amino acids are leucine, isoleucine, and valine, all of which are essential, which means that our body doesn't produce them and we need to get them in our diet. So for that reason, you can actually get it from food-based supplements. And leucine is the one that's muscle building. And the recommendation is for 2 to 3 grams 3 times a day, which you can actually get from whole food supplements. A scoop of whey protein is going to give you that. A cup of cottage cheese is going to give you that. And 3 ounces of chicken breast. So if you're eating those kinds of things on a daily basis, that's only 3 meals. There's people out there eating 6 times a day. Then you're going to meet that need because you're going to get all of those branched chain amino acids through those whole food sources. That being said, if you're on a very low calorie diet, if you're doing any kind of endurance training, so triathletes, marathoners, where your body's in a catabolic state, so you can't give it enough calories to continue to train, then branched chain amino acids is beneficial. But it's not necessarily going to help you put on muscle mass. It will prevent you burning through lean body mass if you're training at that level.
Right.
So now what about if you're a bodybuilder or somebody who's just looking to put on a lot of muscle mass, will that help? Or is it more just you got to lift heavy and eat a lot?
You got to lift heavy and eat. And that becomes more about your diet, lean proteins. And again, whey protein, if we're talking about a protein supplement specific, is the best when it comes to putting on body mass. And it's because of leucine. So
another part of the question was, how do you know if you're taking too much, or what's the right amount to take, or interactions between supplements? What about that? Are there some good resources for that? Do you just read the label? What's the best way to approach knowing that?
In terms of taking a supplement and knowing if the supplement itself is high quality, I would check the label for 2 things. I would look for informed choice approval, which is a third-party testing company that actually tests products so you know that you're taking what the supplement company is telling you that they're taking. And the other one is NSF, Certified for Sport. So what you'll find with Olympians or athletes competing in college or high school is, you have a banned substances list. So these are the 2 companies that are going to test the supplements to make sure you're taking everything that they say you're getting. In terms of taking too much of a supplement, I would read the label and make sure that you're taking what it's telling you to take.
Yeah.
So, within the kind of supplementation area,
Sure.
Is there anything we're missing, or is there I'll change it. What are things that athletes should be taking? Maybe we'll divide it into 2 parts. What are things that the average person should be taking, and what are things that the athletes should be taking? So I think, BCAA is dependent on the sport and creatine, but what else is there that people should be taking? And then on the flip side, what is out there that's just kind of BS, that's really unnecessary? And
I want to cover that one.
Okay.
I'm going to have a question related to that. But
okay, perfect.
Let's start with the first part.
Okay. Yeah. So what's my list? I'm an athlete. I want to make sure I'm getting everything I need. What supplements should I be taking?
Sure. Whole food first, period, for all of us. The first thing that comes to mind with BS is pre-workout. These pre-workouts have so much crap in them. It's unbelievable. The best form of pre-workout is caffeine.
We just had an episode about that. Yay.
It's phenomenal. Also very well studied. And, from a genetic standpoint, it's actually really cool to see some of the stuff they're doing with high-level athletes in terms of how our genes to respond to caffeine. But I think caffeine is king. You can get 65 to 160 milligrams in a cup of coffee. The recommendation is actually 0.3 grams per kilogram of body weight. So that's how you'd actually want to calculate where you'd want to start. But the funny thing with caffeine is we actually build a tolerance. Right. So caffeine has benefits that are for performance, and it has benefits that are, again, for long term, like it helps with your blood sugar management. It's actually a good preventer of both cancer and heart disease. Right. So that would be the long-term benefit. The short-term benefit from performance would be alertness. It actually maximizes your oxygen uptake, as well as kind of gives you that energy boost that prevents you from using carbohydrates right away. So you get a little bit extra out of yourself and your workout when you use caffeine. Mm-hmm. So if you're an athlete using it for the performance benefits, I would say you'd want to cycle it. But if you're someone who's drinking it every day, in terms of the long-term benefits, you could drink your coffee every day.
So as an athlete, how soon before a workout should you have a cup of coffee or take caffeine?
30 to 90 minutes.
Nice. So, and now, what else is added to our list? So now we got caffeine, amino acids, and creatine. Anything else that an athlete should be taking?
What about cocaine?
He has this on the caffeine one too.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, no, I would definitely bypass the cocaine. I think he just wanted an excuse.
No, I'm just kidding. He does not do drugs.
I mean, if you are an athlete, I would just be conscious of your electrolyte supplementation. So obviously watch the sports drinks, like watch Gatorade, watch Powerade, those kind of things. But I would be conscious of that, especially.
What do you mean by watch them, just to clarify for the listeners? Meaning like don't overdo it or have some of it, make sure you incorporate it. What do you mean by watch?
Well, they tend to have a lot of sugar in them.
Right.
So, which depends on the athlete and the level at which you're training. Right. So, if you're training at a high intensity and you need those carbohydrates, that's quick, that's easy. You could even dilute it with some water so that the sugar rush won't give you diarrhea, because that'll happen too. Yeah. But I think we need to be conscious of hydration.
Mm-hmm. And then the other thing, so vitamin supplements have been huge for a long time, but I've read a good deal that they're not very effective. So is vitamin supplementation something that's important? Is it completely ineffective? Are there times where it is effective?
I think there's times when it's effective, but I think when it's effective is when we're deficient.
So studies will prove that again and again. Your body will utilize it if it doesn't have it. Yeah. But if you don't have a deficiency, taking a supplement is like pretty much useless. Yeah. However, like some people will take it as like a security blanket type of thing, which is fine. But I also think like why spend your money when it could be spent elsewhere, like on your food and getting your nutrition through your food rather than a supplement.
So did we miss any questions?
Well, just to follow up. Well, no, I think we pretty much covered most of it. I'm gonna double check right now.
It also happened to cover a lot of
collagen
that we wanted.
Well,
to
that's
talk
what
about.
I want. Yeah, that's what I want to cover. So because I spoke with Melanie before this, because recently I've had a lot of my personal clients asking me about collagen. And I know they're some of them are doing high intensity training, but for the most part, they're just your everyday average person doing some exercising. And I've read about collagen peptides being somewhat, like still studies are limited, but being effective for people with arthritis. And so therefore you would think it would support your bones. And so I guess my question to Melanie was, is that something in sports performance that people need to be doing, is having like collagen peptides, adding that in any way?
It's not going to hurt you, but it's not a necessity. Again, if you're eating a balanced diet and you're getting all of your essential amino acids, I think some of the questions come into play, if we do talk about vegan or vegetarian diets as compared to people who are eating animal-based proteins. When I think of collagen supplementation, I'll be honest with you, one of the best things that you can drink is bone broth.
That was my follow-up question.
Yeah, but I don't think Again, as an athlete training at an elite level, and I know that there's professional athletes out there who will say that they just drink bone broth, but I would even call BS on that, because I think when you're training at that level, there's more that you need than just bone broth.
Right, exactly. Fair. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so we brought it up. So we were gonna ask it later, but you brought up the vegan thing. So
boy.
we get some crap about
We
vegan.
get a lot
Any
of-
comment vegan that's not positive, overwhelmingly positive, is not good. We just released our ethical veganism episode, so I'm interested to hear the feedback.
Can't wait to
But
listen.
I do, so I guess the question is, can a vegan diet be made ideal for an athlete, or is it unrealistic as the ideal thing? So now we know there are vegan athletes and there are successful vegan athletes, but are they more the exception to the rule? Maybe if you can answer a little bit of, give us some insight into, how good or bad eating a vegan diet is for an athlete.
I don't think I would define it as a matter of good or bad. I don't think it's ideal. When you look at additional supplementation and when you look at, the needs of a vegan, and I'm talking about the perfect vegan who's eating a very well-rounded diet, nutritional yeast, giving them B12, then again, supplementing with some of those other B vitamins. I think they you can't really compare that with someone who's taking in animal-based proteins and consistently getting all of their essential amino acids on a daily basis.
So now I guess we'll get to more just general. What are some nutrients that are commonly kind of deficient in an athlete's diet? Like, what are some foods that athletes maybe need but are missing from the average kind of diet?
I think you can overlay this to everybody, a high level athlete and an everyday person. It's your actual diet is very much about variety. So what I found with people, especially when you design menu patterns and actual meal plans, is some people like to eat the exact same thing every day. Other people refuse to eat the same thing every day. It becomes a matter of being prepared. So I think the most important thing here is just to eat a variety. I don't know that there's any one specific superfood we should be eating. If it is, it's probably spinach. I mean, eat more green vegetables, eat more cruciferous vegetables, because that's been proven to be good for everything. Mm-hmm. So
I guess what comes to mind in that is, I know with a lot of athletes there's a lot of inflammation, so the antioxidant rich foods would probably be beneficial to them. And then for runners, like anything iron rich, because they're constantly putting their pedal to the metal type of thing and depleting their iron sources. But overall, I think Melanie is right in the sense that we just need variety in the diet, which I think a lot of people, it's hard because when you're changing your eating habits, it's easier to have the same thing every day because you're just trying to find something to stick to that works for you. But once you finally get that part down, then it's about switching out your carbs and switching out your protein and switching out your vegetables and your fruits and getting a variety, because each food is going to provide an additional benefit. And if you outdo one, you're not getting enough of something else.
Exactly.
So how would a diet differ for an average person, maybe who still works out, wants to be healthy, as opposed to an athlete? And sort of when you flip that around, what changes do athletes need to make when they come down from being an athlete? You see it a lot.
Good question.
From professional football players or whatever it is, people who eat tons of calories, right? And then they get a little older, right? They still have the appetite, but they're not training like they did. They're not competing like they did before.
Good question. And I think you answered it yourself. It's about energy consumption, right? So a high-level athlete, to keep them from being catabolic, to keep them anabolic, you have to eat a lot of food. So for some athletes, that might mean eating 6 meals a day and then supplementing on top of it. For the average everyday person, I think some of the issue becomes, being exposed to all these different products and supplements and things like that. Sometimes we feel like we need to be doing that, but we don't always have to be. Mm-hmm. So I think for the average everyday person, whether it's 3 meals a day, 4 meals a day, or 6 meals a day, your caloric needs are not going to be as high as someone competing at a high level. That being said, your protein needs aren't going to be as high. I don't think the average recommendation right now for everyone with protein is what we need. I think if we want to maintain more of a lean body mass, our protein needs are probably a little bit higher. But I think the general rule of thumb for that is to try and get between 20 and 30 grams of protein in each time you sit down to have a meal.
So obviously different sports have different energy requirements and different caloric requirements. So let's say, how do the needs of, let's say, a straight endurance athlete like a marathoner, how does that differ from, a more anaerobic sport or something that's somewhere in the middle, let's say from like, powerlifting versus, a basketball player or a boxer? How do those demands vary, or the nutrition demands vary based on the type of sport that you're playing?
Well, it's funny. I mean, I actually realized this past year that I was thinking, like someone who's running cross country, that their needs would be higher than, a women's basketball player. And I was dead wrong. So I think they're actually both relatively high. I think the way that I assess it with my athletes is they all wear like heart rate monitors and trackers. So you can see what they're expending. And you need to find that balance. So if I'm working with a weight class sport, so if it's a wrestler or a boxer, something like that, and we're dealing with weight cutting, it's totally separate, because weight cutting itself, you can talk about it in terms of a long-term weight cut or a water cut, which is its own ballgame. If you look at long distance runners, obviously they want to be long and lean. So you want their body mass low, but you're also trying to fuel them appropriately. So that becomes heavily about carbohydrate and, again, additional supplementation off of that. When it's about weightlifting, again, making sure their protein is high, their carbohydrate intake, and the timing of their meals is appropriate. So when they're lifting, when they're in the gym, and when they're not.
Now, Justin and I both participate in sports that involve weight cutting, so I think that mentioning is interesting. So if you're in a sport, let's say a wrestler, or MMA fighter, that is dealing with and I guess there's a long-term and a short-term cut.
Yeah.
So maybe if you can talk about each part. What nutrients are important for the athlete who's got to train at a high level, sometimes 3-4 hours a day, but while at a significant caloric deficit in order to meet weight? Like what does the athlete need to think about? Just based on the fact that they are at a huge deficit, but they still have to perform. What kind of insight can you give?
Well, I'm like itching here. I think that's part of the common misconception with weight class sports, and I have a very good friend of mine who is a world champion boxer, and we've had this conversation to the nth degree, in that this common misconception is that we need to perform at a very low caloric intake, because that's the best way for us to lose weight, and it's not. When you talk about a long-term weight cut, I would look at it as a 3-month measurement. So if you know that you have a match or a fight or something like that, you need to get your nutrition on point, and you need to start then. So it's a matter of getting your lean body mass. I think it's about 7% if you can. And it's a slow dietary change. And you want to you want to build lean muscle mass and rid your body of fat mass. So it's a matter of actually changing your diet if what you're already doing is not working. So lean proteins, you do want carbohydrate intake, because in order to perform, you need glycogen in your body. And you want to get your fat from high quality fat sources. So, you want to focus on omega-3s and rid yourself of trans fats. And honestly, if you're eating any crap, things like that. And then again, the short term with a water cut, if you're already down to your leanest weight, the water cut itself is literally just about water. So that's the sweat. And at that point, it's a matter of then coming back and just rehydrating yourself.
So now with because I've done a couple of these weight cuts.
Yeah,
how effective
they're rough.
Is actually I do want to go back. I mean, you'll probably have a similar conversation that you had with your pro boxer friend. But so now with the with the water cut, how is it because I've tried this, like, does sodium loading work where you take tons of sodium and drink tons of water, and then that somehow is going to help you flush out your system when it comes time for the actual weight cut? Or is that just a myth? Like, was I wasting my time, like, with all the sodium and all that water, like 2 days or 3 days out before the weight cut?
Well, that was the problem, 2 or 3 days out.
Yeah.
I start it with my athletes a week.
Okay.
It's a week-long slow cut. So the last day, honestly, it kind of sucks.
Yeah.
But again, you have fuel in your body, and it is literally just a matter of repleting that. So definitely not a myth. The water cut is a thing.
Now I agree kind of philosophically that any athlete that's cutting weight should be cutting from, you should be starting 3-4 months out, and it should be, you shouldn't be depriving yourself too much. But the reality of combat sports, especially MMA now, is that people cut insane amounts, like unrealistic and scary
Unhealthy.
amounts of weight, unhealthy. And so in that case, is it just a matter of they're just kind of being dumb about it, or are there things that they can do when, given the fact that they're really, if you're cutting 40 pounds over the course of a couple months, or literally cutting 25 pounds in a week, is it just that they're just not being smart about it and somebody's gonna get hurt, or at some point, or is there a way to do that safely?
Yeah, I think a lot of times it's not being smart about it. But then again, you talk to most elite athletes who are where they are. And, my conversation with a dietitian, with anyone I work with, is always, let's talk about your goals, your short-term goals, your long-term goals. And my overall goal is always a healthy, sustainable lifestyle change. But you talk to an elite athlete who's going to compete in a week, and they're like, well, screw it. Yeah, I'm going to do everything I can to get there. So I think my job, doing what I do, it's important to understand their perspective and the realism behind what they're trying to do. But it's hard, and I think unless certain rules change too, in terms of when you weigh in and what that looks like and what your body fat percentage should be, then some of those things won't change.
So do you think that there is sort of this pervasive mentality amongst athletes, elite athletes, that they're sort of running their body as hard as they can? They know that perhaps later in life they're going to have problems, but that's collateral damage. That's part of the job. That's they know they're doing this, but it's how it is, and it's what it's got to be.
Yeah, I think personally, as an athlete, when I was competing, I didn't think that way. I was concerned about the longevity, but again, I never won any national or international champions, and I'm not an Olympian, so I don't think that way. But I think even if you look at, Lindsey Vonn was on last night, and they're talking about how she's broken almost everything in her body and she's still going. So yeah, I think it's a commonality. I don't know that it has to be that way, but yet I think there's so much respect to be given to these athletes who literally do every little thing that they possibly can to be there. So,
sort of in line with this, we're starting to see, and I guess amazing that we haven't even thought to ask this yet, but we're starting to see development at the youth level like we've never seen before. We're seeing specializations. Basically, a kid who's 7 years old, 8 years old, like that kid's playing football, this kid's, a swimmer, whatever it is.
The Russians were doing that.
It's like, they're above that. Yeah. No, basically, in certain countries, you basically get torn from your home and get thrown into the training center, and that's what it is.
Yeah.
Right. But right here in the States, and I don't know about in the UK, or in Australia and in those countries. But certainly, we've heard about that in Russia, in China, that the athletes get taken and start being trained from a very, very young age. So I guess with that being said, what are some aspects of nutrition that children that are training on very high levels at a young age, do they have different needs than adults do? And what do children need to be thinking about?
Well, I think when we're talking about young children, it has a lot more to do with the parents. And what I found with working with the youth is even the influence, my influence isn't going to, take wrestlers, for example. I walk into a room and I speak with a bunch of 10 to 16-year-old boys. They are not going to be listening to me talking about nutrition, period. My influence comes through educating the coaches. So that is your spokesperson for us when it comes to nutrition. They are my first line of defense. So the education is for them. And nutritionally with supplement intake, again, enter creatine. This is something that has been tested.
For kids?
Yeah, with kids. So it's something that obviously should be taken with the recommended dose under the supervision of a doctor, and the child needs to understand that. Right. So, but that is something that they can take.
But really, you're saying it's the parents that need to be educated.
Yeah, it's the parents. It is the adults
really
that have a direct impact. It's not necessarily going to be us as the expert. So it's our job to educate the coaches and the parents. And I would say more so the coaches than the parents. So,
well, and I guess that's conversely, it should be so coaches and I guess parents too. Sometimes parents are coaches should be seeking out as much information, should be really learning about the stuff if they're going to have kids that they're training.
Yeah.
So the more they know, it's going to be better for the kid.
Absolutely. One of the things that I'm trying to do is work with youth coaches. Now it's awesome because you're seeing at a lot of these larger colleges, they're actually paying to have sports dietitians or sports nutritionists on staff to work as performance nutrition coaches with their athletes. We don't have that at a youth level, but because of the need in terms of these kids, coming out and, ready to rock at age 5, there's a need for that. And there's a need for it on the training side too, because, and I can't speak for that the same way you can, but I imagine if you're only working certain muscles your whole life from ages 5 to 25, I mean, that might put some strain on other parts of your body.
Yeah, no, that's definitely been an issue. But I think that it seems as if like the sports world, because a lot of fitness pros tend to come from athletic backgrounds and we're kind of on the coach's side. I think we've seen faster adoption of having like a fitness professional involved, whether a physical whether it's a kind of performance coach like a CSCS or an athletic trainer or a physical therapist. You definitely see kind of easier adoption of that than a sports dietitian. I think a lot of the attitude sometimes is you just got to work hard, and you don't consider that at the highest levels every bit counts. And if you're eating a better diet, if you guys are at the same level and one person's eating a better diet, that person's probably going to, have the advantage. So I think,
you'll
definitely
be outworked.
Yeah, absolutely. So changing gears a little bit. This is just random question I had. So you mentioned spinach as a superfood. Any other like superfoods? Anything else that everybody should be eating this thing because it's so great for you? Or maybe I'm going to change a little. Like, what are your top 5 foods? Like, top 5 like superfoods?
Well, Tony hit the ball on the head when she was talking about anti-inflammatory foods. I mean, that's huge. And cruciferous vegetables, which I mentioned before. So broccoli, cauliflower, kale. We said spinach.
Beets.
Yeah, beets would be another one.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. Beets would tie us into like earlier questions when we're talking about pre-workout. You'll see beets a lot. Beets, tart cherry juice, nitric oxide, which actually helps.
They're usually in the pre-workouts.
Yeah. It helps with oxygen uptake.
Yeah. So because you mentioned about pre-workouts how like they might not be the best because I think most of them, like you said, have other stuff to it. Mm-hmm. But I actually know of a pre-workout that I take it's a clean one and it uses like tart cherry juice or whatever it is, and that's like the sweetener of it, and therefore it's easy. Also, it doesn't taste disgusting, which makes it nice.
I have a couple triathletes who they actually drink a beet juice. It's one of their juices that they drink before they go on like a long bike. Yeah, and swear by it.
My boss at one of my gym I work at, the personal training manager, he was listening to the episode about beets, and so he makes fun of me and the beets pretty, whenever sometimes it just.
What episode was it that I was on that one?
Yeah, you were here because I told you the story about why I hate beets, which involves Gary.
That's funny.
Right.
So if you're listening, you didn't hear that episode. Quick, very very fast. I hate beets because we were at dinner with my grandmother, my brother, and and my friend Gary, and Gary ate beets and those beets came back up and he threw up just this red slime. And ever since then, even the taste of beets, I can't do it.
All right.
So you didn't like the taste of the red slime?
Ew. Okay.
So anyway.
Why do we always talk about like bile or poop somehow?
I'll be honest, the one thing I would say with beets too, and again tying back into an earlier question, pre-workout and even post-workout, because tart cherry juice will help kind of like suppress that inflammatory state. Because they are like considered nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is something that people who go through migraines tend to be a trigger. Like you'll see sulfites in wine, things like that. So for people who have migraines, I would be conscious of that.
Good point.
Taking it because that might trigger it. It might not, but it might. So
good point.
A weird thing, actually. Now that I think about it, at that time I was getting migraines. I think
just
maybe
another
due
reason.
To stress, but maybe that was it. But so now, actually, speaking of the superfoods, so I've heard that apples and honey are also kind of like if you're gonna get sugar, that those are some of the best sources. Does that make sense? Does it matter, or did I just hear some? Yes.
I don't think it matters. I think when you, especially,
sugar,
and when you're training, again, depending on when you're training and depending on what you're eating, like, are you training intra workouts or are you on the bike and you're trying to get carbs? I mean, I have an athlete who eats potatoes. He boils potatoes and that's what he eats. It's a matter of what you can tolerate.
Right, exactly.
I take what I do, which seems to help me when I work out, is I will have packs of honey. So if I need like a quick shot of energy instead of drinking a Gatorade.
You mentioned that for my half, and I was like, no, can't.
Yeah,
the thought of that consistency and the stickiness
while
I'm running and I'm sweating, I'm like, nah.
Yeah, just rip open the pack of honey and take it out. Now the problem is that what I've read though is also that honey comes from China and it's probably not actually honey. So if I want to do my shots of honey, I might actually need to get real honey and do that. But that's a different story.
Yeah.
But anyway, now, so the next question, I guess, obviously the logical follow-up to pre-workout is post-workout. So what should athletes be doing post-workout? And does it vary by the sport or activity?
I would say let's just generalize high-level athletes here. Someone training 2 to 3 times a day. It's definitely worth taking a post-workout protein shake. Whey protein obviously being best. If you're trying to bulk, you want something a little bit more calorie dense. So that's where, carbs are cheap and they're easy. So you can add that into your shake and that's more calories that'll help your bulk.
So now, would this protein shake be before having an actual meal?
Yeah.
Okay, and should this be immediately after the workout? 20 minutes, 30 minutes? What would be the ideal?
Honestly, that's another kind of like BS thing. Your body's going to replenish itself over that 24-hour period. I think they say it's optimal, honestly, in the first 30 minutes. But it's a matter of, honestly, if you're going to have another meal. Because whey protein will digest in your body. If you're just drinking a whey protein shake in an hour, so you could feasibly, if it's an athlete, again, who I need to get calories into, drink your shake, and about an hour later, you should be hungry to eat a full meal. If it's someone who is using a protein shake for, like, convenience, then it's worth putting other things into your shake, again, to round that out. Maybe some healthy fat, definitely like a handful of spinach, kale, make a smoothie out of it.
And that would be their meal.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the difference. It comes into the state of like, are we talking about an everyday person? Are we talking about someone who we need to fuel, we need to get calories into? So it's a matter of efficiency and ease of digestion and absorption.
Now, for me, I typically work out, but for whatever reason, I end up let's say I'll eat maybe a few hours after I work out and I don't have the protein shake. Would it be beneficial for me? Yeah, I'm not training for any sport. Yeah, I train hard, but I'm not, training for any competitions.
Yeah.
Would it be beneficial to have a protein shake after it, even if I'm going to have like a big, balanced, high protein dinner?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you only, and this will be, this is a good little test. Are you eating once a day? Are you eating twice a day? How many meals do you usually have a day?
I'd say three. I do about, it depends on what I'd say I have about 2 big meals. Okay. And then I'll snack a couple times throughout the day.
Okay. So I would say it's definitely worth it unless you're having protein with each of those snacks. It'll help you with your lean body mass if you have that protein shake, especially if your big meal is going to be a 12, 16 ounce steak, because you're probably not going to absorb all of the protein that you're getting from that steak. So,
well, speaking of Ryan's eating schedule, you're still fasting, right?
Oh yeah. So I've been trying intermittent fasting.
Okay.
For a couple of reasons.
You're not fasting. You're intermittent.
Intermittent fasting. I mean, mainly it's fairly easy. It's like I can do the 14 hours with between sleep and when I eat lunch, it works out well. And actually, this is interesting because I've been doing it for about a month now.
All right.
Yeah, I've been doing it about a month, and I've actually feel a difference. The actual quality of my foods probably hasn't changed. I'm still not eating as well as I'd like overall.
Okay.
You eat pretty well.
Yeah, I eat fairly well, but I still snack a lot and I eat some junk. Like, I don't post
Yeah,
the
I don't-
muffins and stuff that I
He only sends
eat,
you
or the
the good
massive amounts of
pictures.
that's
chocolate
funny.
that I had last week. And when I say
Food
that, I mean I
confessions.
eat way too much. But I have been doing it, and also just saves money. Like, instead of spending, a couple things that happens is what I'll do is in the morning I get up really early, so first thing in the morning I'll grab something because I can't cook because I don't have time. So I'll get my coffee and I'll grab something to eat, whether it's like bacon and egg wrap or whatever it is. It could be healthy, it could be oatmeal. But then by 10 o'clock I would go get my second coffee, and then I would go get something else to eat.
Yeah.
And then by 11 o'clock or 12 when I actually have lunch, that's my lunch. And so all of a sudden I've spent $10-15 already on food before I have my meal at 11. And what I'm noticing now is I'm not really that hungry by the time I have my meal at 11:30, 12 o'clock. So I'm saving money, and it's not really negatively affecting me energy wise. My coffee's fine. I have my coffee in the morning, and so yeah, I guess, can you tell us where is the science on intermittent fasting?
For women, we talk about something called a crescendo fast. So you don't do like an intermittent fasting that 14 to 16 hours every day. You might do it 3 days a week. For men, the research is actually great. When we look at it on a sports side and weight loss, it's honestly about caloric intake. So a lot of these diets where we tend to lose weight, you're just taking in less calories. So they all even out. It's honestly about what works best for your lifestyle. So if you tend to eat your heaviest meal at night, you're probably not going to be that hungry in the morning anyway. So it might work better for you. But what I would say is if you're having your first meal at 12, 1 o'clock, it should be a higher protein meal because you have been fasting.
So now, can fasting work for an athlete?
I think that's a great question.
Or more so maybe a high-level athlete? Because I know if you're just sort of recreationally competing, you might be able to get away with it if performance is not your biggest concern.
Yeah, it's not something I would recommend, no. And I think, that would even tie into the thought of like, do I work out in a fasted state? Do I fuel before I work out? And honestly, like, I can say from a personal state, like, I actually like running fasted in the morning just because I don't digest food very well before I work out. Mm-hmm. But if I were to, say, have time to train 3 hours after I had actually eaten a good meal, I'm going to run faster. Yeah. So the science says fuel your body before you work out. But from a comfort level, it's a matter for you. Fasting for the elite athlete, not something that I would recommend, no.
Okay. Yeah, and I would say if I typically work out in the late afternoon, early evening. If I had to work out in the morning, I don't like working out fasted, but I don't like working out right after eating either. So I think I would definitely, if my schedule changed where I had to work out at 8 o'clock, I'd be eating a meal. I don't think I'd be able to keep up the intermittent fasting. But personally, since I only do, even if I work out really hard, it's so late into the day that I've already had 1 or 2 meals, and so it works easier for me. But yeah, I can imagine that athletes should probably stick to having energy when they exercise.
Is it generally safe to work out in a fasted state?
I think that ties into, are you a diabetic and we're worried about your blood sugar dropping, something along those lines. But other than that, there's really no reason, unless you can think of anything, Tone. I think it's on an individual basis.
Well, I remember when we did the whole episode on intermittent fasting and I was doing my research, and there weren't enough studies to really kind of say, because there was a lot of studies on intermittent fasting, but not a lot of studies on intermittent fasting and sports performance. Yeah. And I mean, I would just say, I know that what about injuries? Like that would be my biggest question is that, are you more likely to have an injury because of like muscle fatigue, or I don't know.
Well, and I think, again, that's the benefit of being consistent with your intake when you're training, 3-4 times a day.
Yeah.
Like, again, are your glycogen stores
the thing
full?
Also
Can
too,
you perform? Is your inflammation at bay, kind of thing?
Right. And just to kind of just go off that, because I know we did a whole episode, so I don't want to spend too much time on intermittent fasting, but so many people, and I feel like just because someone's an athlete doesn't mean their nutrition's great.
Yeah.
Actually, half the time that's not even true.
Yeah.
Right? And so for the everyday person, intermittent fasting, unfortunately, right now has just become another diet, and it's another trend. And, it can be utilized, but what Mel said very well is if it fits your lifestyle.
Yep.
And I think that's the number one question before starting or doing anything. It doesn't even matter what the science says. Are you going to be able to stick to this long term? If you feel like this is a method for you, then we need to decide what the research says and how we can make it work for that person. But overall, if it's not something if it just seems like it's going to be something that you're going to do for another month or two and then fall off it and go back and try new diet trends, then, you want to reassess if this is for you to start with.
It's so funny. I call it the N1, right? So when you look at any research paper, it's N is this many people. This is how many participants we had in the study. And that's exactly what it is. You are your own N1. Mm-hmm. So, if you're coming to work with, Tony or myself or another dietitian, we're going to ask you, what have you tried? What has worked for you?
Right.
And what doesn't, And it's so funny. I mean, intermittent fasting especially. I happen to know a wrestler really, really well. And, he is a faster to no end. But he also grew up not eating like that before he actually got into nutrition. So you know what? That's comfortable for him. It's what he knows. And, he eats really, really well when he eats. So it is. It's all about your lifestyle.
Yeah. And that's another point, too. Like, if they're eating healthy meals when they do eat, then it's completely different than someone who I know really, really well.
Yeah.
Who does intermittent fasting, who doesn't eat, who just has a caloric deficit. That's how he loses weight. But his food is literally, there's no nutrition. And it makes me want to, just throw the nutrition in. I'm like, you need a vegetable.
Yeah.
But yeah, so anyways, any other questions?
Well, one big question that has been staring at me, which we covered a few of them.
Okay.
But we always love to ask this question because, as I always say, truth does not sell.
That's his tagline.
I like it.
So, what about some just other, or that we haven't covered, some other misconceptions, some general misconceptions, whether it's about sports nutrition or just nutrition in general that you can think of? Are we missing any? I know there was a few myths or a few this and that's here, but we always love to get all those misconceptions. I call them misconceptions.
I mean, I think the big thing, and I know there was a chunk of questions again surrounding vitamins and minerals and things like that. I think it's really important to get your lab work done. I don't think a lot of us get our lab work done. And I think it's really easy to say, oh, my vitamin D is probably low because I wear sunscreen and I don't get a lot of sunshine, or I live in this state, or there's not enough sun.
Lab work is so difficult. You have to go into the lab and in Phil, they have these dumb questions there, and you have to go in there. And then the lab is only open on some day where you have classes, and you have to miss class to go into the lab to do your assignment. But that's not what you meant.
No, so not what I meant. But I do think when it comes to taking vitamin and mineral supplements, it's really important to know what your baseline is. Because fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K, D, sunshine, the one we talk about all the time, for a lot of us, it's really low. And if it is low, it is something that we should supplement with. But if it's too high, it's fat soluble, so it's going to stay in your body. And that's when you can have a problem with toxicity. The B vitamins, when people take them, they're water soluble, so we pee them out. That's when you talk about expensive pee. So something like that, if you really want to take them, they're not going to hurt you, but you're paying a lot of money just to pee it out.
Right, when they should be spending that money on
whole food.
Where is a good place to get your lab work done?
I would have a chat with your physician.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And typically that's something that they can set up for you. And to be honest, most insurance companies at least cover that once a year.
Okay. At least a basic CDC.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there are a million other questions we could ask. Obviously, I'm going to be selfish and ask one that probably applies to both of us. So Justin and I both are on the wrong side of 35, and but we both are athletic, or like to think we are.
Okay.
And so what, as you do approach your 40s, what is important for people to keep in mind if they're trying to stay athletic and maintain their athleticism, with the reality that the body does start to diminish to some extent? once, as you get, late 30s, early 40s, 50s, like how do you sustain kind of the athleticism, and not at an elite athlete level, but just at, at a level
we like
where
to think so.
You can still play basketball, you can still box, you can still train. What are some things you might have to think about as you're approaching that age?
Well, I would say obviously you want to keep moving. And I think you can speak on this more than we can, but how weight-bearing exercise is so important, especially for us as women in osteoporosis prevention. But again, be really conscious of your diet. I think a lot of us don't take into context just how important it is in terms of overall health and wellness for right now and many, many years to come. And when we do, we're starting too late. Right. So, start now. If you don't eat any vegetables during the week, start with 2 vegetables. And then maybe the next week, start with 4 vegetables. And then maybe you'll be having a vegetable with at least 2 meals during every day. It's about taking small baby steps. But no matter where we're at, we really need to start doing that now.
Cool. Nice. Well, I guess that's it. Anything else to
Isn't
add?
she amazing?
Yeah, Melanie's amazing.
Melanie, tell everyone where they can find you, follow you, and ask you questions.
Sure. You can follow me on Instagram at nutritionbymel, and you can email me at mboehmernutrition@gmail.com.
Spell Boehmer for them.
BOEHMER.
So mboehmer@gmail.com.
Boehmer Nutrition.
mboehmernutrition@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. We'll put that in our show notes and everything, so people will contact.
And we'll tag her on Instagram.
Yep.
So.
And we'd love to have you back on, anytime. Open policy, anytime you want to come back on the show.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Love
Cool.
that.
All right. Awesome. Well, I guess that's it. As usual, all of our stuff can be found at TheGymWits.com. Send us quick questions, emails at TheGymWits@gmail.com. So I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, aka Chef Sonic, reminding you that truth does not sell.
And I'm Tony Marinucci, aka Tips with Tony, a registered dietitian.
And we are
The GymWits.